Welcome back to Retro Wednesday, the Tidarium Hangar. This is Mike, and today I want to talk to you about the rarest, most expensive figures in the vintage toy line. We're going to talk about toy lines from the late 70s to the early to mid 90s, and I'm going to talk about several different toy lines and the rarest figures in those toy lines. So if there's a rarer figure or a more expensive figure, and I didn't mention it, put that in the comments below, and I'm going to do more of these in the future. So what other toy lines are out there that have some really rare and expensive figures? I want to know so we can do it in the future. But let's talk about this first, coming up. First off, we're going to take a look at the Silverhawks toy line. Now, Silverhawks themselves have gone through the roof, but the Silverhawks toy line figures have even more expensive figures. We're going to talk about the most expensive figures. Steelheart is the only female figure that they made, and this figure is actually hard to get. A very expensive figure, between $200 and $300, depending on condition. And that's the thing about Silverhawks overall. The VAC Metalized is a lost art, and we're probably not going to see any get made in the main line ever again with VAC Metalized. There might be some specialty companies making those, but not ever again at the store. So looking at that, that in itself makes it a rarity. But this being a girl, being a female character, probably wasn't played with so much as kids. It was probably like, oh, that's not the one I wanted. Kenner did kind of tone down the VAC Metalized with the Ultrasonic series, and a lot of the characters got remade slightly different with Ultrasonic, but the most valuable of those would be Quicksilver. Quicksilver in his Ultrasonic is the most valuable and most expensive Silverhawk that's out there. He is hard to get, and it's because they didn't produce very many. Everybody already had a Quicksilver in their collection. Why did they need another one with less VAC Metalized? Oh no, this was the cheaper version. Well, not anymore. And this figure can command anywhere from $300 to $800. Wow. Next up, we're going to talk about the Rambo Force of Freedom toy line. Not based off of the movie, no, based off of the cartoon. But still, it did feel like it was based off the movie in a way. These figures are actually some of the cheapest figures to collect. If you look to say, am I going to collect Silverhawks or Thundercats? Well, when you go to collect Rambo, you find that you get them a lot cheaper. You could probably dial out a whole Series 1 set and get all the vehicles and playset for far cheaper than any of the other toy lines. So it makes it for a good toy line to collect. That is until you get into the Series 2 figures. And one of the problems with Series 2 figures is some of them didn't even get released in the US. So the ones that didn't get released in the US are far more expensive. Now, Dr. Hyde is one of the expensive figures. He is expensive for a lot of reasons. Rarity is one, but the electronics inside usually don't work. So if you get a working one, that one is one of the more expensive of the Rambo figures. It lights up. The one you're looking at right now is the Joska variant, and it doesn't have a light up feature. It just has a clear helmet so you can see his head. The one with the light up has a tinted helmet, and you push the button and you will see the head when it lights up. It's a really cool feature. It was a really interesting idea, but it doesn't hold up. This figure does not hold up over the years, and if the batteries were left in it, the thing is dead. Complete and working, commands about $200, but that's nothing compared to what we're about to look at. XRay is the most expensive figure, and the reason is because he wasn't released in the US. He was released mostly in South America, so he's actually still sort of attainable. It's not like he's impossible to get, but he does command a higher price. And the funny thing about him is that they actually remade him in multiple variations in other countries, and the variations are worth a lot more. Now, I actually think that the variations are the same level of common as this figure, but let's have a look at that one. Now, he did get a repaint, and the colors are different, all for the Desert Brigade. The Desert Brigade version of this guy has the tan vest. It's slightly different. The holster's a different color, and all in all, it's still the same figure, but it's kind of cool to see the variations. And see, there's an extremely rare figure and an extremely rare figure variant. Pretty awesome. Next up, we're going to get into Visionaires. Visionaries have actually exploded in the last year. And I have to say that what the prices were last year were nothing compared to what they are this year. It's one of the strange conundrums out there. But as you can see from this picture, it's a nice looking picture of a lot of figures. But one's missing, the most expensive. The most expensive figure of all of them is Riken. And there's a lot of reasons why this guy is expensive. But he is a cool looking figure. He is probably the coolest looking figure of all of them. And also on top of that, he was the driver of the very expensive Dagger Assault. Hasbro was really good about giving you a figure with a vehicle, and that driver only came with the vehicle, so makes it a lot more sought after. Harder to get. If you were a kid, you had to just not play with Riken if you didn't get your Dagger Assault. So that was kind of a disappointment for kids somewhere. But looking at this vehicle commands $400 or $500 itself, maybe even more if it's in good condition and complete and nothing broken. Odd thing about this is it only came with 2 guns, but it's got spots for 3. It should have had 3 guns. There's one more angle to Riken and why he's so expensive is because of the chest symbol, because of the hologram of the lizard. Now, the lizard on the right is correct, is the way it should look. On the left is what a lot of the European version figures looked like. I think in the UK they got the wrong chest symbol. They got the wolf on there, and everyone wants the lizard. So these kids got shafted in multiple ways. Either they didn't get a Riken, or if they did, they got the wrong chest symbol. It's sad, and so that makes it even harder to get a correct Riken with a correct chest symbol. One more rarity is the purple-chested Arzon figure. This goes for a lot of money if you can find it. And I have to admit that this figure is elusive. It's hard to find. It's an error, but it is a true variant. And as being a true variant, collectors are after this. And since there are so few that pop up, you probably see 2 or 3 of these a year. You see hundreds of Rikens pop up. So Riken is rare, expensive, but this guy is more elusive. Thundercats are a lot of fun and colorful, and they look pretty cool on a shelf, but trying to dial out that shelf can get really hard. So the Driller figure, I don't think this one was released in the US, and I don't have a lot of knowledge about some of these rare Thundercats figures, but really this figure is cool looking, it's different, it's strange, and he's supposed to drill down into the earth, I guess, into the ground, and it's got features and functions, and LJN worked in all kinds of features in these figures. But in the later in the line, they come up with some crazy ideas, and this is kind of an interesting, cool idea. So Driller and Stinger are very similar type figures. This is Stinger, and it has its own feature with those wings. There's 2 different versions with the clear wings and the kind of the pink sort of looking wings on there. But they both range from $300 to $500 in asking price or sell price on these figures. Loose, used, played with. But this one here, it's the level of wing attachment or availability that really states whether this is going to be a figure that you want or not. They do make reproduction wings. They're expensive reproduction wings. And I don't even know where to get them because I haven't looked into it that hard because I can't seem to find this figure. But it's still a cool looking figure for a crazy price. Well, the most expensive one is probably Tongosaurus. This figure, can you call it a figure? It's almost like a vehicle accessory, but it's counted as a figure, so I'm going to count it as a figure. And it looks crazy, wicked, wacky, but it's a figure basically with a big old tongue to grab your figures. And it came at the end of the line. Like most toy lines, things that came at the end of the line didn't sell very well. Kids had moved on from it, and so it didn't get very many made. So it's sought after and hard to get, and hopefully we see this in the Super 7 line, right? G.I. Joe had a lot of figures, just a ton of figures, but it seems like a lot of the mail-aways are worth the most. This is the Steel Brigade figure, and to have that green backpack and everything, he commands about $100 to, I've seen him go for $1,000 if he's AFA'd. Again, I don't mess with AFA, and I don't mind having a loose figure un-AFA'd. I'd rather that, by the way, so I could do something with it. But still, it looks cool. It's a crazy looking figure, and it's hard to get. Next up is the Starduster, and Starduster is another Melloway that was hard to get. They reused the same backpack because I have a few of these backpacks laying around. So that's kind of cool. If you get a Starduster, you might already have a backpack. So it's easy to get some of these parts, and some of these parts it's not easy to get. There's also two variations of Starduster. One's got a grenade and molded into his upper left of his chest, and the other one's got a gun with a holster. So depending on which of these variations, I don't really know how they make a Melloway figure and give it two variations, but there are variations to it, and so for that, you gotta get them both, or do you? Again, we've got expensive figures that are packed with a vehicle, and see, I don't know how I feel about that. You gotta buy yourself a vehicle to get these figures, or if you're collecting later, there's just less of them on the market, but you gotta buy the Defiant to get payload and hard top here. So with this, the Defiant itself is huge, and it was expensive when it came out back in the day. Nowadays it's astronomically expensive, and so getting the figures to complete your Defiant is going to be hard. Being a figure only collector, it's still hard. These figures are expensive, they're not cheap, but hey, just getting these two figures is way cheaper than going after Defiant. And what seems to be one of the rarest and most expensive and most valuable figures that are out there is the Mickey Mouse Cobra Commander. This is a first edition straight arm Cobra Commander, came out in 1982. See, the thing about this figure is he has the straight arms, but it's the printed Cobra symbol that makes it worth a lot. A nice close-up comparison can compare those two symbols. Actually, the one that's worth less, the standard one, looks so much better than the Mickey Mouse. Collectors are just after it because it's rare and they want to have a complete collection. Still, it's kind of an interesting part of history when it comes to collecting a real American hero G.I. Joe line in the 3.75 inch. Getting into the Masters of the Universe He-Man line, we have a lot of rarities in the He-Man line, starting with the Wonder Bread He-Man, which a lot of people felt like didn't really exist, or was it a myth, or was it just a custom figure? But now they're showing up this day and age. We're seeing many more of these appearing and surfacing, so it really was a thing to have the Wonder Bread He-Man. For me, it's just a paint variation, but for others, it is a holy grail. The rest of the expensive figures are figures that were released out of the US, and they're later in the line, like this one here with his Megator, and they did make this figure in the Classics line also, so a lot of these rarities and oddities can be found in the He-Man Classics line, and this figure is just crazy. 16 inches tall, I think, something like that. It is huge. It's a ginormous figure, and it's kind of crazy looking. But the rarest and probably most expensive figures out there in the vintage line is Skeletor and He-Man, but in their laser light or laser power versions. Now, again, we saw these remade in the Classics line, an homage to these figures, but they were never released in the US. They were released overseas in very small quantities and even had variations. So getting into these figures, it's tough. And trying to get them complete is going to cost quite a bit of money. So the last toy line I'm going to talk about today is Star Wars. Vintage Kenner Star Wars had a lot of very rare figures that are shooting up in price today. Talking about Yak Face, and a lot of people do look at Yak Face and go, he's a rare, expensive figure. He is a bit rare, but he's way too expensive for the fact that you can always find 8 or 10 of them on eBay, so he's not that rare. He's not that expensive, but he is still pretty hard to come by, and everybody wants him to finish their 92. This guy also did not appear on his own card back. He was that elusive. Next up, we have double telescoping Luke, Vader, and Ben. Now, first of all, the actual figures themselves are very common, so it's pretty easy to get the figures. It's this double telescoping lightsaber piece that makes them valuable. There's also variations on those, whether there was a mushroom pin or not, and if you see a loose one in the wild, more than likely the extendable part of the blade is going to be warped or messed up or bent or broken. So more than likely a real one is going to have some issues. Now, for this they say Luke is the most common, and then Ben and Darth Vader are less common because Luke was in the early bird kit, so there's that many figures more produced. But we're talking in existence, not even double the amount. When it comes to the whole double telescoping fiasco, if you're not willing to pay thousands of dollars for a double telescoping lightsaber accessory to add to your figure and make it a double telescoping figure, I would suggest you just go spend a few bucks and get a reproduction one and enjoy it. If you're anti-repro, you need to put that nonsense aside and just enjoy this feature as a reproduction item because it is awesome. It is an outstanding item, an outstanding way to enhance your collection. Even with a reproduction one, I wouldn't spend thousands of dollars on these even if I had the opportunity, because I would rather just have a reproduction and enjoy it. It was a great option, and you're not going to worry about breaking or snapping the tip off of your $2,000 lightsaber. Next on the list here is the Vinyl Cape Jawa, but another situation where it's the accessory that's worth far more than the figure. So on an action figure list, I really don't want to talk so much about just the accessory is worth a lot, but the accessory is worth a lot. Worth between $4,000 and $6,000 for a cape, because you can get a Jawa and a gun for like $30. So it's the thousands of dollars to chase down a cape, and I think that's a bit crazy. Talking about actual rare Star Wars figures, the actual rarest Star Wars figure is this Vlix, and it's from the toy line, the 1985 Droids toy line, and was it 86? Anyhow, Star Wars was dead. Everyone had moved on from Star Wars. It just stopped. But yet, they tried to keep it alive with some terrible cartoons, and so it didn't sell the toys. A lot of these people have made some customs of these figures of Series 2, but out of all the Series 2, Vlix itself got released overseas, and that's it, making it the rarest Star Wars figure that's made in the vintage toy line. So what do you think about all these rare figures? Do you have any of these rare figures? Are you after any of these rare figures? And what other toy lines, what other rare, expensive figures are out there? Because I want to talk about them in a future episode coming up. Like, subscribe to Dream Hanger out.